They were a forgotten people in a swampy land. But in just a few centuries, they forged a kingdom that terrified Europe and changed the course of history. How did Prussia rise from obscurity to become an empire? This is the untold story of Prussia, a state that began as a minor duchy in the Baltic marshes and bogs along the Baltic Sea, populated by pagan tribes known as the Old Prussians. They were not Germans. They were Balts, cousins to the Lithuanians and Latvians, and they lived isolated lives, resistant to Christianity and outside the influence of the great empires of Europe. The conflict came to a head in 1410 at the Battle of Grunwald, one of the largest medieval battles in Europe. The Teutonic Order was dealt a devastating defeat. Though they survived, they never fully recovered. Internal revolts weakened them further, and over time, the great monastic state began to crumble. Brandenburg lay in the heart of the Holy Roman Empire, while Prussia sat far to the east, still technically outside the empire. He invited French Huguenots fleeing religious persecution to settle in his lands, boosting the economy and injecting new skills into the state. Hungry for recognition, he maneuvered diplomatically and in 1701 crowned himself king in Prussia. When he came to power in 1740, Prussia was a respectable kingdom, but still minor compared to France, Austria, and Russia. His soldiers drilled endlessly. His officers were professionals. His state was efficient, educated, and centralized. He encouraged science, literature, and legal reform. He was a paradox, an Enlightenment monarch ruling with absolute power. Military thinkers like Scharnhorst and Gneisenau revolutionized the army. The old Holy Roman Empire had been dissolved, and a loose German confederation stood in its place. Austria and Prussia vied for influence. In 1862, a new figure appeared on the scene, Otto von Bismarck. The Franco-Prussian War united the southern German states with the north. But this was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of the end. The Prussian army crushed the French at Sedan. Napoleon III was captured. The Weimar Republic was born. Prussia survived as a state within the Republic, but its power was hollow. Then came the Nazis. Hitler despised the Prussian elite, yet he borrowed their imagery, the uniforms, the medals, the myth. In the cautionary tale it represents, of a state that rose through discipline and fell through its own rigidity. Prussia was not just a place. It was an idea, of statehood, of strength, of sacrifice. It built an empire. It changed a continent. And though it is gone, the ghost of Prussia still walks through the corridors of history. He used Prussian militarism as a tool for his own totalitarian goals. And in January 1871, in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, the German Empire was proclaimed. Its territories were divided, East Prussia given to the Soviet Union and Poland. The German population was expelled. The cities were renamed. The name Prussia disappeared from maps and memory. Wilhelm I was now emperor, not just of Prussia, but of all Germany. He was a master of realpolitik, the politics of pragmatism and power. Bismarck had a vision, a unified Germany under Prussian leadership. The new empire was dominated by Prussian values, discipline, hierarchy, obedience, but it struggled with democracy, modern industry, and a changing world. The Junker aristocracy resisted reform. The military held enormous sway. And when World War I erupted, it was the old Prussian order that led Germany into a devastating conflict. The state restructured itself, embracing new systems of merit, education, and mobilization. In 1864, Prussia and Austria defeated Denmark and claimed Schleswig and Holstein. In 1866, Bismarck turned on Austria. The Austro-Prussian War was swift and decisive. Austria was defeated, expelled from German affairs, and a new North German Confederation was formed under Prussia's leadership. But Bismarck wasn't finished. When Napoleon was finally defeated, Prussia stood among the victors. But he turned Prussia into a great power. The other kingdoms now had to pay attention. Frederick was not expected to be a warrior. He was a musician, a philosopher, a student of the Enlightenment. In the late 18th century, Prussia participated in the partitions of Poland, 3 diplomatic and military operations that wiped Poland from the map and expanded Prussia eastward. The Kingdom of Prussia now controlled vast territories. But with greatness came enemies. And when Napoleon rose in France, Prussia became a target. But within months of his reign, he proved the world wrong. He invaded the rich province of Silesia, triggering the War of the Austrian Succession. Prussia emerged victorious. Then came the 7 Years' War, a truly global conflict, and once again, Frederick held back superior enemies through sheer genius and determination. His army was disciplined to perfection. His tactics were innovative. His will was unbreakable. This title was a compromise. He couldn't be King of Prussia because the Holy Roman Emperor would never allow a royal title within the empire. But because Prussia technically lay outside the empire's boundaries, he was allowed to call himself king in Prussia. It was symbolic, but the symbolism mattered. Prussia was now a kingdom. He struck deals with the nobility, the Junkers, offering them privileges in exchange for loyalty and taxes. His vision was clear, to make Brandenburg Prussia efficient, centralized, and powerful. But this split geography would become a strength. The 30 Years' War, one of the most devastating conflicts in European history, tore the German lands apart between 1618 and 1648. Brandenburg Prussia was ravaged by war, plague, and famine. Yet from this destruction emerged a formidable leader, Frederick William, the Great Elector. That resistance would seal their fate. With the blessing of the Polish king, he secularized the Teutonic state and became the Duke of Prussia. But this would not last. When Albert's line died out, control passed to his relatives, the Hohenzollern family of Brandenburg. These rulers now held two titles, the Elector of Brandenburg and the Duke of Prussia. Though legally separate, they were ruled in personal union, creating the foundation of Brandenburg Prussia. The Duchy of Prussia was born, the first officially Protestant state in Europe. Ironically, the land that was once conquered in the name of Catholicism became a stronghold of Protestant reform. In the 13th century, Pope Innocent III launched what came to be known as the Northern Crusades, not into the Middle East, but into pagan Europe. He called upon the Teutonic Knights, a German Catholic military order forged during the Crusades in the Holy Land, to bring the sword and the cross to the Baltic tribes. And grew into one of the most disciplined, militarized, and feared powers the world had ever seen. With brutal efficiency, the Teutonic Knights marched across the land, establishing fortress after fortress, wiping out villages, building cities, and Christianizing by force. In a matter of decades, the old Prussians were either exterminated, assimilated, or displaced. The Teutonic Knights weren't just warriors, they were rulers. They established a theocratic state along the Baltic coast with massive stone castles and a strict military hierarchy. Cities like Königsberg and Marienburg were founded, and the land was now referred to as Prussia. From its early struggles with crusading knights and Polish kings, to the iron rule of Frederick the Great, to the unification of Germany under Bismarck, this story is filled with strategy, conquest, betrayal, and ambition. But buried beneath its triumphs are shadows of wars, of absolutism, and of its eventual downfall. The rise of Prussia is not just the history of a state, it is the story of how a nation can be forged through sheer will and shattered by the very strength it built its legacy on. Long before anyone called it Prussia, the land was wild, covered in dense forests, and bring it they did. But the knights made enemies. As their power expanded, they clashed with Poland and Lithuania, two rising Christian powers who resented the order's ambitions. In 1525, an extraordinary transformation occurred. The Grand Master of the Teutonic Order, Albert of Brandenburg, converted to Lutheranism and dissolved the monastic order. For a time, the Duchy of Prussia remained a vassal state of Poland. This new entity was geographically awkward, its territories weren't contiguous. Frederick William understood that survival required strength. He reformed the army, centralized the administration, and laid the groundwork for what would become a militarized state. His legacy was continued by his son, Frederick III. The real turning point came with his grandson, Frederick II, known to history as Frederick the Great. Under Frederick the Great, Prussia became synonymous with military excellence. Frederick's successors expanded this legacy. The Battle of Jena-Auerstedt in 1806 was a humiliation. Napoleon crushed the Prussian army and occupied Berlin. The myth of invincibility shattered. But Prussia did not disappear. It reformed. Throughout the 19th century, Prussia emerged as the dominant force in German politics. Through 3 calculated wars, he achieved it. In 1870, he provoked France into declaring war. Prussia had achieved its ultimate goal. From a marginal duchy, it had created an empire, the most powerful state in continental Europe. The culture of militarism that had made Prussia strong began to stifle it. Defeat in 1918 shattered the empire. The Kaiser abdicated. The monarchy fell. After the Second World War, the Allies decided that Prussia must end. In 1947, it was officially abolished. But its legacy endures. In the bureaucracy of modern Germany. In the culture of order and precision. To uncover the shocking downfall of the German Empire Prussia created, click the next video on your screen.